Hi, welcome back to Ac3TV. I'm Justin Tippett and I'm joined again by David Jaffe, Consulting Director of Limebridge Australia. David, welcome back to the show.
Good to be here, Justin.
Now, David, all the call centre managers that I'm talking to now keep saying, we always want more from our centre. Is that reasonable that people always want more?
Well, I think it is reasonable. We really think that's management's job, is to try and get more performance from their centres or from their operations, and often they have lots of indicators that show them they have potential. Those indicators could be anything from long hold times, high transfer rates, rates of repeat contacts, handoffs between areas, transfers between skills. These are all good symptoms, and you'll see more on the screen now, of indicators that there is at least potential for higher performance. It's only once managers have eliminated all those things that we wonder if what further potential they might have. So they're the places to look. And another symptom is perhaps variation. So if there's significant variation between team performance and individual performance, that's another indicator that there's something to work on.
Right, okay. So does that mean that managers need to focus on individual sort of performance variations, or just look at a broad view?
Well, that's interesting that you asked that, because there's a lot of focus on individual performance in call centres today, and often we hear that's what people are working on.
Yeah.
But we kind of think of that's a 10 to 20% opportunity, when if we think about, if you like, the system as a whole, and I mean that not in a technology sense, but in the sense of all the things that make up the system, like practices, like resourcing, like our measures, like our structures, like how we manage the place. Those give us a much bigger opportunity of the sort of 70 to 80% scale. Okay. So if we just manage the people bit, we're possibly focusing on the smaller opportunity.
Yeah, and I think we touched on that in one of our earlier episodes about that whole PRISM concept.
That's right. We use that model of PRISM around those 5 things: practices, resourcing, indicators and incentives, structure and measurement, to make ourselves look at the broad system of the way the place operates.
Though it sounds easy, you always make things sound easy, right? But does it really work?
Well, maybe the best way of me talking about that is looking at a particular case. So let me give an example. We went into a centre once. It was a multi-centre, so it was like 3 different operations, 3 locations, and management believed they had some kind of opportunity, because they thought that handle times were possibly 200 seconds higher than they had been in the past at some point. That was an indicator that there was an opportunity. We went in and did a diagnostic exercise where we said, well, look at hold times. Transfer rates were running at 25% between skills, so that was a lot of double handling. And a lot of stuff wasn't getting resolved. It was being handed off to back office. So that showed there was definitely an opportunity there for people to work on. Now, interestingly, in that case, when we were first asked to look at it, they thought the opportunity was one about coaching. So they said, oh, we need a coaching framework. And we said, well, you'd be coaching against practices that don't work. Why do you want people to be good at things that are in themselves inefficient? So that was the 10 to 20% on the people side. Yeah. And we said, actually, if we can address the whole model, if we can repair all those things, we've got a much bigger prize here. So that's what we set about doing. So first thing we looked at is why they had 7 skills, and hence they were transferring a lot of calls between them. Yep. And we took that down to 2 tiers. So we took it down to people who could handle simple calls, and then they also triaged the call and transferred it to someone who could handle the complex, the people with more experience. So that gave us like a skill matching benefit of now the simple stuff was being done by people new to the centre, the complex stuff was being done by people who'd been there and had the experience. Yeah. But we also took that opportunity to rethink every process and question, why was all the stuff being done? Why were we IDing customers when they just wanted to make a payment, as an example? But then we had to put a framework in place to support that. So that was where we had to say, well, what is manager's job within that centre now to coach against the process, make it stick? What measures do we need to make people effective in that model? And how do we now recruit and induct to make that model work? So it really was a multi-dimensional change, and the results were really interesting.
Yep. So just talk to me about that process. You mentioned a lot of things there around what you did, reviewing the processes and the ID and etc. But how long does something like that take to do?
We got all that done to diagnose where the opportunities were. Took about 4 to 5 weeks. Okay. And that's fairly typical. Yeah. And to get it done, we always aim for a time frame of around 3 months, and then to pilot it. Right. We fundamentally believe we can over-engineer this stuff and spend too long in analysis paralysis, rather than just, let's get something out there that's 90% there, and then let's fine-tune it in some kind of pilot form. And that's what we did here. And the results were great. I mean, we were very pleased, and they were pleased in that we managed to get that handle time down by 25%, so we freed up 25% capacity in the centre,
Yep.
and got better sales outcomes, and got higher resolution. So everybody won. The shareholder won, the staff won because they were more comfortable operating in that way. There were fewer things that they were frustrated by, and the business and customer won as well. So wins for all.
I'm sold. I can see why you're so busy. Now, I noticed that whole conversation that we've just had, you didn't mention the word technology once.
Interesting, yes. Well, we do find sometimes that we can do a lot without tackling technology. Of course, technology is important, but in some ways, that example is a classic. Well, they had lots of technology. They had skills-based routing, and they had fancy workforce planning systems, and they had lots of things that could enable a more effective operation. But they hadn't done those other things, tackled those other dimensions to make it more effective. And that's what we often find kind of goes wrong with technology projects. We're so busy getting the technology out there, we're not taking the time to say, how do we want it to operate? So that's why we have to do those things together. If you read there's a lot of papers out there about why technology projects fail, and they often talk about the things that aren't getting done. So we're not rethinking the process, we're not rethinking the structure, the role, the measurement, and those are the things that make it work.
Okay, well, you just touched the magic word, papers. I know every time we have an episode, you normally have a little goodie on the website. What have you got for people this time?
If people are interested in this stuff, we've got a paper called The Myths of One-Dimensional Change, which kind of covers why we don't just tackle one of those elements, why it's worth looking at all of them.
Fantastic. Okay, well, again, if you're interested in that, please go to www.limebridge.com.au. Now, David, what have we got in store for our next episode?
Well, given that I covered a lot about that 70 to 80%, those dimensions, we thought we should talk about coaching and talk about how we work on people, because clearly that's still important.
It certainly is. All right, well, we look forward to the next episode. Thanks again for joining us tonight, and we'll see you in the next episode on coaching.
Great.